A couple of other quick features in here, and then I want to look quickly at how we can, well, we'll see if we have time to get ASP.NET to talk to this really quickly. There's a great feature in here on the toolbar. If I highlight my query, and there's a button here that says, right here, include actual execution plan. I'm going to click that button, and watch what happens when I run my query now. When I execute it, I still get my results, still get my messages, but now I get an execution plan. What the heck is this? And why would we care? What is this execution plan showing us? Notice these numbers at the bottom saying cost.
Is that a network cost, like how much physical memory or something?
That's right. It's the memory and the resource usage. So if we write a really complicated query, we have a web page that's loading really slowly, and people are complaining our page is too slow. We can run our query here, turn on the execution plan, and it will show us each step of the query what percentage of the overall resources are being used. So we can identify bottlenecks and optimize our performance, maybe by tweaking or rewriting our query. So any tables we join to, it will show us what percentage of the cost, for example, each join cost us, or a where clause or a group by. So we can rewrite our SQL to try and optimize it to make it run faster. Okay? Because if we're writing pages, and particularly search pages, and people are waiting too long, they're going to stop using the site, or they're going to start complaining to us. So this is a great tool to allow us to optimize. We also have the ability here, I'll show you how to run a backup. So if we want to back up our database, I'll click on my Friday database here, right click and choose tasks. We want to take a backup. So if I click backup, it'll let us set an expiry date. So let's say we want to keep 2 weeks worth of backups. This is by default. It saves it in this backup folder with the .bak extension. We also can say, under the options, that we either want to just add on to the last backup any new data, or we could overwrite it entirely. If we have a huge database worth like hundreds of gigs, we might just want to append on anything new rather than overwriting the whole thing. So I'll just click OK. Chugs along for a minute. So now we have this BAK file. So this is typically what I do. Let's say I'm building a new application. I'm going to work with my local SQL Server now. I'm going to build out the application with a local copy. Now I'm ready to put it on the host. I already have a local copy of my database. I have all the tables. I might have some data in them already that I want to keep, like maybe list of countries, list of products. So the way I would move a database from my local machine to another server, or maybe Carlin's going to work with me. Well, Carlin now needs a copy of the database, right? He needs his own copy. So I'll take this backup file, and now if I was going to go to my host, if I was going to put it on Loosefoot, what I'd do is I'd take that BAK file, I'd upload it to the server with FTP, and then I could go in here, go into pick a database, and I could click on their database import wizard, and it would let me browse for that BAK file, that backup, and it would restore that backup file and overwrite the existing database. Or if I want to take a database off of the server, and I do this occasionally, maybe I want to have a current copy of one of my clients' databases. Maybe it's being updated regularly. They're always putting new data in. So that data lives on the server. I want to have a local copy because they want me to make some changes and they want me to work with I need the current data. But I don't want to mess with the live database. I want a local copy. I can just go back to my database. These guys run nightly backups. So for any database, here's the last, 3 weeks. Every night they run a database backup. So I can either restore from a backup to the live one, or I can download, and this will give me the BAK file from that day. Or maybe something weird happened on that day, and they want me to take a look at that database file for the day. I can download it. Actually, I'll do this. So I'll just save this into my, so there's the default directory. Just goes into SQL Server, MS SQL Backup. If I save that one, now I could go in and make a new database. And then I can restore from that backup and I'll have the whole thing. Oh, I already have one called that. That's okay, I already have an Aqueduct database, I'm gonna overwrite it. So if I say restore my database, I can go and choose my backup set. So here's my BAK file I just downloaded. And I want to, so I want to restore that one. And I want to overwrite the existing database. I'm going to get rid of what I had. Runs pretty quickly because the file's compressed. So there are all my tables. I just pulled them off of the host. And now I have a local copy. So if I want to start making changes, but I don't want these changes to be live, I can work on my local copy until I'm ready.
Can you make your changes live from this program?
Yep, there's two ways of doing it. So one is I can also import or export entire databases. So if I want to export, so let's say I work locally and I want to put it on another server, I can use the backup method, or I can say export data. This will say, okay, where are you exporting from and where do you want it to go to? Doesn't even have to be another database. I could export data. Let's say my client says to me, I want to see all of my current products and all of the pricing in an Excel spreadsheet, or I want to see all my customers. Well, we could just take our customers. Actually, we could take our database, and we could export this to an Excel spreadsheet. So we want to export. We'll pop up a wizard, which will take a minute to load. So I want to export from SQL Server, from my local machine. And then it will say, okay, where do you want to export it to? So this could be another SQL Server. I could send it right to the host database. Oops. Or I could choose a text file. I could send it to an Access database, a MySQL database. Basically anything. I shouldn't have clicked that button. It's going to think for a while. So I could choose Excel. And we could do the reverse, right? If our customers, let's say we've built them a data entry program, but they already have a whole bunch of data in text files or Excel spreadsheets. And they say, I know you built this application for me to put my products or my customers in, but I already have them in this list. I don't want to type them in. Can't you just batch get them in? Sure, we can say from Excel into our database and it'll copy a table in. We do that all the time. We get third-party sources of data we want to come in. We just use the import-export wizard for that. So not only can we, so here I'm connected locally, right? Here's my local database. That's what all of you are connected. But I also can connect remotely. So here are my databases on Loosefoot. Okay, so I could go in and write. I can see all the tables in this database. I've saved the login. So here's my, somewhere in here is one of my databases. So we can connect to remote servers through Management Studio. So in here are all the tables. I can go in and query any table or write my own SQL queries. So not only can you connect locally, but you can connect to your remote databases that are on your shared host. Okay, so it's very, very robust. We can basically do everything we need to do in terms of our databases through here. So MySQL Workbench is similar. It doesn't quite have the power of Management Studio. Okay? So a lot of this stuff they've now baked right into Visual Studio, so we don't even need to have this open. I like having all of the extra tools that come in here, and I'm comfortable with this user interface, but we can do it right through Visual Studio. So let's try that now. Let's open up Visual Studio, and I'll show you how we can connect Visual Studio to SQL Server and look around that way. So we're really not going to code much for today. We might have time to do one quick page. So I'm going to make, so if you open up Visual Studio, we'll make a new project, just as we've been doing. So click on File and New Project. And we'll pick the same options we've been choosing under Visual C#, Web, ASP.NET Web Application. I'll call it Lesson 6. And then I'll just choose an empty web forms. So nothing new. We've done this last 5 weeks. We'll click OK. So we'll just have a blank solution. There are no pages here. We should probably just add a default page. We're not even going to bother with a master page in CSS today. So I'll just right-click my project and choose Add. And I just want to add a web form. We don't need a master page today. Just add a web form, and I'll call it Default. Yeah, they put the air conditioning on, I think, sometime towards the end of last week, and now all the rooms are cold.
Okay.
Usually this room is boiling hot.
So they're actually using things that make that temperature.
So if we want to connect to our database through Visual Studio, you should have this Server Explorer tab over here on the left. If you don't have it, you can just enable it. If you click on the View menu and choose Server Explorer, it'll give you this window over here on the left. So to connect to our database through here, if we click on Data Connections and right-click, we'll choose the Add Connection. Now you're going to get another window before mine. It'll ask you what type of connection do you want. Choose Microsoft SQL Server in the little window before this one. I've set mine, and there's a box at the bottom that says always use this type. So I already checked that on mine, which is why I don't get that prompt anymore, because I've checked Microsoft SQL Server in the past and I said remember my choice. Okay, you can always change it. So for your server name on the lab computer, put in localhost ACPAC. And if you're on the lab computer, just leave Windows authentication set. You don't need to put in your username and password. It's using your network login. And then for the database name, there's a little drop down here. You can either click the database name or you can just type Friday. If you're on your own machine and you set up the database locally, then set the server name as local and put in your system administrator login. And you can click Save Password.
So password, sorry, the password would be,
It's the password
Oh,
you
yeah.
created when you installed SQL Server.
oh, okay.
It's your system administrator password for SQL Server. So you're going to need that for your web pages to talk to your database.
Okay.
Just like in PHP and MySQL, right? You needed your MySQL password for your PHP page to connect.
So it'll give you a pop-up saying the password when you open up the, that thing.
Yeah, well, it's prompting you right here for it.
Yeah, but I meant when you download it.
Yes, when you install, it'll say you need to set up an administrator password and it can't be blank.
Yeah.
The username by default will be SA, and yes, it'll prompt you for the password.
Okay.
Okay, so then I can just click the test button.
Hello.
We're good, so Visual Studio can see our database. So I'll click OK.
I get an error when it clicks OK.
Yeah,
It says host connection is successful. It has pre-displays in my server name. It displays my first database that I created in the other program, but when I do OK, it doesn't. Gives me unable to add data connection, cannot load file or assembly. Culture equals neutral, public key token.
You've got the host as localhost /ACPAC. It's not a /, it's a /. Because localhost is the name of the server, and we can have different instances. So ACPAC is an instance that was installed. So if I go to my Server Explorer now, I have my connection, and if I expand it, this is almost like a mini version of Management Studio. I can see my tables. Here's my customers table. I could run a new query. So I've got the ability to run my SQL queries and things right here. So I can, type a select star from customers. I can run this stuff right in here. It has the execution path if I want it. And I can just execute it right here. There's my results. So they've sort of taken some of the functionality of Management Studio, and it's now been added into Visual Studio. So basically, most of the things we want to do with our database, you can actually do right from the Visual Studio Server Explorer. You don't have to also use Management Studio anymore. The more advanced tools like importing, exporting, backing up, you can't do that stuff from here. But if you want to add or change a table or run queries, you can do that here. So some of you will probably never really open Management Studio. You'll prefer just to work in Visual Studio and do everything here. Then that's fine. So that's through the Server Explorer. We've got access basically to our whole database here. And this doesn't have to be local. This could be a remote database that's on your web host. We can still add it through here and access it through Visual Studio. So what I want to do is show you a really quick and dirty way of connecting in a web page to this. We'd never really use this for an actual site, where this is going to be like a 5-minute thing, and then after reading we'll look at how do we properly get our .NET applications to talk to SQL Server. So I'm going to go back to my default page. If you see the toolbox here, you can click on it. If you don't, you can enable it through the View menu. Click View and Toolbox, just down near the bottom. So this is the code-free way to connect to your database. I'm going to close up the standard section, and I'm going to open up the data section, and I'm going to drag on an SQL data source. This is the one and only time we're ever going to use this. You're not allowed to use this after this week. Okay. So I'm just going to drag that on. It'll just give it an ID and a run at equals server. This is invisible. It doesn't show. It's basically a connection to our database. So there's no visual representation of this. You won't see this in the browser. And then I'm going to go back to the toolbox and I'm going to drag on a grid view. So a grid is what we use for showing an HTML table that's showing the result of a query or a table. So I'll just drag that on, and it will set up a grid of rows and columns. So what we want to do is set our data source so that it connects to our customers table in our local database. So I'm just going to click on View and Properties. I want to turn on the Properties window. It's right down at the bottom. Gives me this window on the right. So if I click on my data grid properties, we can set the connection to our database. So over here, there's a property that says connection string. And if I click the drop down, it finds the connection we just made in Server Explorer. And it will write out this HTML. So here's my connection string. You should have a little drop down here if your connection was saved in the Server Explorer. There's a connection string property. It's in the data section. And now we want to tell it what data should show up. So if I scroll down, it says there's a select query. If I click on this little button here, again, we're going to do this the code-free way. I could type an SQL command, or we could let Visual Studio write the SQL for us. I'm lazy today, so we'll do that. I'll click Query Builder. It'll say, okay, what tables do you want to put in the query? I'll add my customer table and click Close. And if I make this a little bigger, I want all the columns. We can test out the query. So here's the query results. And I'll just click OK. So this is the query we want to run. I'll click OK. So it will add that SQL query into our data source. Okay, so it's going to do the database connection and run the SQL command for us without us writing any code. All I've done is click. So the last thing we want to do is wire up our grid so that it's connected to this data source. So I'll just click into my ASP grid view, go back to the properties, and my grid view has a property here called the data source ID. So where is the data coming from for the grid? Yeah, it's coming from our SQL data source control. So this data source does our connection and runs our query, and this grid uses that data source to show the data. So if I just start, I clicked on debug and start debugging to launch the site, we should actually get a grid of data without writing a line of code. That's pretty easy.
So, what's the downside just doing it that way?
Great question. Before I answer that, and we can store, and also notice it auto-built the columns. We can style it however we want. We could customize. We'll work with these grids a lot. Okay, like moving forward in a few weeks, showing you where we're going. Let's see. No, that's not the way I want to. So here is a student lab. Lab 2, we'll get to this in a few weeks. We'll see what it looks like. So what's the downside of doing it that way? So this is basically what you'll be building out. So here's one of those same grids, although we didn't use that data source control. Here's another grid. So we can customize, we can add links, we can use styling on it. but it auto builds out the columns for us. We can customize it, so here we added currency formatting. Why wouldn't we actually want to use this method in a real web application? What are the limitations of it? Well, think about our connection string. The connection string is right here. What are the problems with putting the connection string here? I can think of at least two.
Well, it's telling them where our database is.
Right, so we've got the connection string directly in here, which isn't great. How many places should we have our database connection in a web application, or any application? If we have 50 pages, where should the connection string go? Yeah, we should have it in one place only. Where should it go?
Its own file. Oh, yeah.
This is where it should go, in our web.config file. So when we use those controls, it repeats our connection on every page, which means if we change the connection, you have to go into every single page and change it.
Well, so if you're to do it that way, you have to keep on copy and pasting the same thing over.
You got to use it on every page.
If you may change it.
And this also only runs one query, right? There's one SQL. We may need to write multiple queries on a page, which means you need a separate data source for every one. Like, you know, you're doing a query to write your header links. That's one query, so you need one of these. Then you have a query to write your content, your main content. Then you need a second one, sidebar. So they're not scalable at all. This is just a really quick and dirty way of doing it. We've never really used this in an actual application. Okay, this is just sort of a getting started. So what we'll do after reading week is we'll look at using, and I put the stuff on Blackboard for today, but I'll move it into the lesson 8. We're going to look at using a proper architecture. For MySQL, we used a library called PDO. PDO was the library that let our PHP pages talk to our MySQL database. Microsoft has a similar version that was called ADO. PDO, the PHP, they stole the name. ADO's been around a lot longer. Stands for ActiveX Data Objects. So it has things like connections and queries, just like the PDO library and commands we're used to working with. But then on top of that, they have this other technology called the Entity Framework, and that's really where we're going to start. That's the recommended way. That's the way .NET applications are being built. So rather than write the connection commands and stuff ourselves, we use Entity Framework, and it, as you can imagine, it auto-generates and pre-builds a lot of stuff for us that we can use. Rather than us having to code stuff manually, we can use Entity Framework. It's really powerful, but it's a very different way of getting your applications and databases to talk to each other. So that's kind of where we're going to start after reading week, and then we'll start building out this kind of this application. The programmer students are a few weeks ahead of us. Okay, but this is kind of where we're going. We'll be building this and building it out over the next several classes after reading week. So we can do add, edit, and delete using SQL. What's on the exam? So some of the basics, well, if we just look, some of the basics of what ASP.NET is and how it works, okay? How we get running in Visual Studio, you know, what is compiling code and code behind pages, how do those things work?
But not database.
Databases, I might ask you a few basic things about SQL Server, but that's it. Like a few basic things that we covered today that are in the video, things we've talked about, or how Management Studio works, but not coding, because we didn't get into it. You know, the basic server controls. So what is a server control? How are they different from HTML controls? So text boxes, buttons, list controls, validation. Things like data types you had to do in your calculator, right? We had to convert our text fields where they were numbers. We had to do conversions to decimals so we could perform math. Those kinds of things. That's what the exam's going to be. Okay,
It's not one big practical.
No, there is a practical section, but what you would have to do would be similar to the kinds of things we've done in class, like a one-page, you know, use a few different controls and build a small one-page application that calculates something or shows something.
It's open book.
Yep, it is open book.
We can do it on our own machines? Or
You can do it on your own machines, and try and be here before 8 so that you can start right at 8 and you have the full class, okay, to get it done. So then we've got reading week. So what we'll start doing, again, after reading week, I think we will do GitHub first thing. There's actually a couple of great tutorials, one right on Git that we'll use, and another really good one from Code School. Maybe our first hour we'll go through these. An hour will be plenty of time. So how do we use Git outside of Visual Studio is what we'll do first hour. And then we'll start building out. I'll give you a full database script. We'll talk about Entity Framework. I'm going to show you another quick video about how it works. And then we'll start building out this application, which we'll just roll out over a number of weeks. Rather than doing a new solution each week, we're just going to keep building on. So we'll add more and more functionality into this. Eventually, we're going to add security and error handling on here as well. Okay, that's it for today. I'll put the videos up.